136 days before. The week before I left my family in Florida and the rest of my minor life to go to boarding school in Alabama, my mother insisted on throwing me a going-away party. To say that I had low expectations would be to underestimate the matter dramatically, although I was more or less forced to invite all my school friends, i.e. the ragtag bunch of drama people and English geeks I sat with by social necessity in the cavernous cafeteria of my public school. I knew they wouldn't come. Still, my mother preserved a wash in the delusion that I had kept my popularity secret from her all these years. She cooked a small mountain of artichoke dip. She festooned our living room in green and yellow streamers, the color of my new school. She bought 24 champagne poppers and placed them around the edge of our coffee table. And when the final Friday came, when my packing was mostly done, she sat with my dad and me on the living room couch at 4:56 p.m. and patiently awaiting the arrival of the Goodbye to Miles Brigade. Said brigade consisted of exactly two people. Marie Lawson, a tiny blonde with rectangular glasses, and her chunky, to put it charitably, boyfriend Will. "Hey, Miles," Marie said as she sat down. "Hey," I said. "How was your summer?" Will asked. "Okay, yours?" "Good. We did Jesus Christ Superstar. I helped with the sets. Marie did the light," said Will. "That's cool," I nodded knowingly, and that about exhausted our conversational topics. I might have asked a question about Jesus Christ Superstar, except that 1. I didn't know what it was, and 2. I didn't care to learn, and 3. I never really excelled at small talk. My mom, however, can talk small for hours, and so she extended the awkwardness by asking them about their rehearsal schedule and how the show had gone and whether it was a success. "I guess it was," Marie said. "A lot of people came, I guess." Marie was the sort of person to guess a lot. Finally, Will said, "Well, we just dropped by to say goodbye. I've got to get Marie home by 6. Have fun at boarding school, Miles." "Thanks," I answered, relieved. The only thing worse than having a party that no one attends is having a party attended only by two vastly, deeply uninteresting people. They left, and so I sat with my parents and stared at the blank TV and wanted to turn it on, but knew I shouldn't. I could feel them both looking at me, waiting for me to burst into tears or something, as if I had known all along that it would go precisely like this. But I had known. I could feel their pity as they scooped artichoke dip with chips intended for my imaginary friends. But they needed pity more than I did. I wasn't disappointed. My expectations had been met. "Is this why you want to leave, Miles?" my mom asked. I mulled it over for a moment, careful not to look at her. No," I said. "Well, then why?" she asked. This was not the first time she had posed the question. Mom was not particularly keen on letting me go to boarding school, and had made no secret of it. "Because of me?" my dad asked. He had attended Culver Creek, the same boarding school to which I was headed, as had both of his brothers and all of their kids. I think he liked the idea of me following in his footsteps. My uncles had told me stories about how famous my dad had been on campus for simultaneously raised hell and aced all his classes. That sounded like a better life than the one I had in Florida, but no, it wasn't because of Dad, not exactly. "Hold on," I said. I went into my dad's study and found his biography of François Rabelais. I liked reading biographies of writers, even if, as in the case of Monsieur Rabelais, I'd never read any of their actual writing. I flipped to the back of the book to find the highlighted quote. "Never use a highlighter in my books," my dad had told me 1,000 times. But how else are you supposed to find what you're looking for? "So this guy," I said, standing in the doorway of the living room, "François Rabelais, he was this poet, and his last words were, 'I go to seek a great perhaps.' That's why I'm going, so I don't have to wait until I die to start seeking a great perhaps." And that quieted them. I was after a great perhaps, and they knew as well as I did I wasn't going to find it with the likes of Will and Marie. I sat back down on the couch between my mom and my dad put his arm around me, and we stayed there like that, quiet on the couch together, for a long time, until it seemed okay to turn on the TV. And then we ate artichoke dip for dinner and watched the History Channel. And as going away parties go, it certainly could have been worse. 128 days before. Florida was plenty hot, certainly, and humid too. Hot enough that your clothes stuck to you like scotch tape, and sweat dripped like tears from your forehead into your eyes. But it was only hot outside, and generally I only went outside to walk from one air-conditioned location to another. This did not prepare me for the unique sort of heat that one encounters 15 miles south of Birmingham, Alabama, at Culver Creek Preparatory School. My parents' SUV was parked in the grass, just a few feet outside my dorm room, room 43. But each time I took those few steps to and from the car to unload what now seemed like far too much stuff, the sun burned through my clothes and into my skin with a vicious ferocity that made me genuinely fear hellfire. Between Mom and Dad and me, it only took a few minutes to unload the car, but my unair-conditioned dorm room, although blessedly out of the sunshine, was only modestly cooler. The room surprised me. I'd pictured plush carpet, wood-paneled walls, Victorian furniture. Aside from one luxury, a private bathroom, I got a box with cinder block walls, coated thick with layers of white paint and green and white checkered linoleum floors. The place looked more like a hospital than a dorm room of my fantasies. A bunk bed of unfinished wood with vinyl mattresses was pushed against the room's back window. The desk and dressers and bookshelves were all attached to the floors in order to prevent creative floor planning and no air conditioning. I sat on the lower bunk while Mom opened the trunk, grabbed a stack of biographies my dad had agreed to part with, and placed them on the bookshelves. "I can unpack, Mom," I said. My dad stood. He was ready to go. "Let me at least make your bed," Mom said. "No, really, I can do it. It's okay. Because you cannot simply draw these things out forever. At some point you just pull off the Band-Aid, and it hurts. But then it's over and you're relieved." "God will miss you," Mom said suddenly, stepping through the minefield of suitcases to get to the bed. I stood and hugged her. My dad walked over too, and we formed sort of a huddle. It was too hot and we were too sweaty for the hug to last terribly long. I knew I ought to cry, but I lived with my parents for 16 years, and a trial separation seemed overdue. "Don't worry," I smiled. "I's gonna learn how to talk right Southern." My mom laughed. "Don't do anything stupid," my dad said. "Okay, no drugs, no drinking, no cigarettes." As alumnus of Culver Creek, he had done the things I had only heard about, the secret parties, streaking through hayfields. He always whined about how it was all boys back then. Drugs, drinking, and cigarettes. It had taken him a while to kick smoking, but his badass days were now well behind him. "I love you," they both blurted out simultaneously. It needed to be said, but the words made the whole thing horribly uncomfortable, like watching your grandparents kiss. "I love you too. I'll call every Sunday." Our rooms had no phone lines, but my parents had requested I be placed in a room near one of Culver Creek's 5 payphones. They hugged me again, Mom, then Dad, and it was over. Out the back window, I watched them drive the winding road off campus. I should have felt gooey, sentimental sadness, perhaps, but mostly I just wanted to cool off. So I grabbed one of the desk chairs and sat down outside my door in the shade of the overhanging eaves, waiting for a breeze that never arrived. The air outside sat as still and oppressive as the air inside. I stared out over my new digs. 6 one-story buildings, each with 16 dorm rooms, were arranged in a hexagon around the large circle of grass. It looked like an oversized old motel. Everywhere boys and girls hugged and smiled and walked together. I vaguely hoped that someone would come up and talk to me. I imagined the conversation. "Hey, is this your first year?" Yeah, I'm from Florida." "That's cool, so you're used to the heat." "I would be used to this heat if I were from Hades." I joke. "I'd make a good first impression." "Oh, he's funny. That guy, Miles, is a riot." That didn't happen, of course. Things never happen like I imagined them. Bored, I went back inside, took off my shirt, lay down on the heat-soaked vinyl of the lower bunk mattress, and closed my eyes. I'd never been born again with the baptism and weeping and all that, but it couldn't feel much better than being born again as a guy with no known past. I thought of the people I'd read about: John F. Kennedy, James Joyce, Humphrey Bogart, who went to boarding school, and their adventures. Kennedy, for example, loved pranks. I thought of the great perhaps, and the things that might happen, and the people I might meet, and who my roommate might be. I got in a letter a few weeks before that gave me his name, Chip Martin, but no other information. Whoever Chip Martin was, I hoped to God he would bring an arsenal of high-powered fans, because I hadn't even packed one, and I could already feel my sweat pooling on the vinyl mattress, which disgusted me so much that I stopped thinking and got off my ass to find a towel to wipe up the sweat with. And then I thought, well, before the adventure comes the unpacking. I managed to tape a map of the world to the wall and get most of my clothes into drawers before I noticed that the hot, moist air made even the wall sweat, and I decided that now was not the time for manual labor. Now was the time for a magnificently cold shower. The small bathroom consisted of a huge, full-length mirror behind the door, and so I could not escape the reflection of my naked self as I leaned in to turn on the shower faucet. My skinniness always surprised me. My thin arms didn't seem to get much bigger as they moved from wrist to shoulder. My chest lacked any hint of either fat or muscle, and I felt embarrassed and wondered if something could be done about the mirror. I pulled open the plain white shower curtain and ducked into the stall. Unfortunately, the shower seemed to have been designed for someone approximately 3 feet 7 inches tall, so the cold water hit my lower rib cage with all the force of a dripping faucet. To wet my sweat-soaked face, I had to spread my legs and squat significantly. Surely, John F. Kennedy, who was 6 feet tall according to his biography, my height exactly, did not have to squat at his boarding school. No, this was a different beast entirely, and as the dribbling shower slowly soaked my body, I wondered whether I could find a great perhaps here at all, or whether I had made a grand miscalculation. When I opened the bathroom door after my shower, a towel wrapped around my waist, I saw a short, muscular guy with a shock of brown hair. He was hauling a gigantic army green duffel bag through the door of my room. He stood 5 feet and nothing, but was well built, like a scale model of Adonis, and with him arrived the stink of stale cigarette smoke. Great, I thought. I'm meeting my roommate naked. He heaved the duffel into the room, closed the door, and walked over to me. "I'm Chip Martin," he announced in a deep voice, the voice of a radio DJ. Before I could respond, he added, "I'd shake your hand, but I think you should hold damn tight to that towel till you could get some clothes on." I laughed and nodded my head at him. "That's cool, right? Then nod," and said, "I'm Miles Halter. Nice to meet you." "Miles, as in to go before I sleep?" he asked me. "Huh? It's a Robert Frost poem. You never read him?" I shook my head no. "Consider yourself lucky," he smiled. I grabbed some clean underwear, a pair of blue Adidas soccer shorts, and a white t-shirt, mumbled that I'd be back in a second, and ducked back into the bathroom. So much for my first good impression. "So where are your parents?" I asked from the bathroom. "My parents? My father's in California right now, maybe sitting in his lazy boy, maybe driving his truck. Either way, he's drinking. My mother is probably just now turning off campus." "Oh," I said, dressed now, not sure how to respond to such personal information. I shouldn't have asked. I guess if I didn't want to know. Chip grabbed some sheets and tossed them onto the top bunk. "I'm a top bunk man. Hope that doesn't bother you." No, whatever is fine." "I see you decorated the place," he said, gesturing towards the world map. "I like it." And then he started naming countries. He spoke in monotone as if he'd done it 1,000 times before. Afghanistan, Albania, Algeria, America Samoa, Andorra, and so on. He got through the A's before looking up and noticing my incredulous stare. "I could do the rest, but I think it'd probably bore you." Something I learned over the summer. God, you can't imagine how boring New Hope, Alabama is in the summertime. Like watching soybeans grow. Where are you from, by the way? Florida, I said. Never been. That's pretty amazing, the country sing, I said. Yeah, everybody's got a talent. I mean, I can memorize things and you can. I know a lot of people last words. It was an indulgence learning last words. Other people had chocolate. I had dying declarations. Example. I like Hank Ibens. He was a playwright. I knew a lot about Iben, but I'd never read any of his plays. I didn't like reading plays. I liked reading biographies. Yeah, I know who he was, said Chip. Right, well, he'd been sick for a while, and his nurse said to him, he seemed to be feeling better this morning. And Ibsen looked at him and said, on the contrary. And then he died. Chip laughed. Ha 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 ha! That is morbid, but I like it. He told me he was in his third year at Culver Creek. He had started in ninth grade, the first year at the school, and was now a junior like me. A scholarship kid, he said, got a full ride. He'd heard it was the best school in Alabama, so he wrote his application essay about how he wanted to go to a school where he could read long books. The problem, he said in the essay, was that his dad would always hit him with the books in his house. So Chip kept his books short and paperback for his own safety. His parents got divorced his sophomore year. He liked the creek, as he called it, but you have to be careful here with the students and with the teachers. And I do hate being careful. He smirked. I hated being careful too, or wanted to at least. He told me this while ripping through his duffel bag, throwing clothes into drawers with reckless abandon. Chip did not believe in having a sock drawer or a t-shirt drawer. He believed that all drawers were created equal and filled each one with whatever fit. My mother would have died. As soon as he finished unpacking, Chip hit me roughly on the shoulder, said, I hope you're stronger than you look, and walked out the door, leaving it open behind him. He peeked his head back in a few seconds later and said to me, standing still, Well, come on, Miles, to go older. We got shit to do. We made our way to the TV room, which, according to Chip, contained the only cable TV on campus. Over the summer, it served as a storage unit, packed nearly to the ceiling with couches, fridges, and rolled-up carpet. The TV room undulated with kids trying to find and haul their stuff away. Chip said hello to a few people he didn't introduce me as he wandered through the couch-stacked maze. I stood near the room's entrance, trying best not to block pairs of roommates as they maneuvered furniture through the narrow front door. It took 10 minutes for Chip to find his stuff, and an hour more for us to make 4 trips back and forth across the dorm circle between the TV room and room 4-3. By the end, I wanted to crawl into Chip's mini-fridge and sleep for 1,000 years, but Chip seemed immune to both fatigue and heat stroke. I sat down on his couch. I found it lying on a curb in my neighborhood a couple of years ago, he said of the couch as he worked on setting up my PlayStation 2 on top of his footlocker. I know the leather's got some cracks, but come on, that's a damn nice couch. The leather had more than a few cracks. It was probably 30% baby blue faux leather and 70% foam, but it felt damn good to me anyway. All right, he said, we're about done. He walked over to his desk and pulled a roll of duct tape from his drawer. We just need your trunk. I got up, pulled the trunk from under my bed, and Chip situated it between the couch and the PlayStation 2, and started tearing off thin strips of duct tape. He then applied to the trunk so that they spelled out coffee table. There, he said, and sat down, put his feet up on the, coffee table. Done. I sat down next to him and looked over at me suddenly and said, Listen, I'm not going to be your entourage to the Culver Creek social life. Okay, I said, but I could hear the words catch in my throat. I just carried this guy's couch beneath a white-hot sun, and now he didn't like me? Basically, you've got two groups here, he explained, speaking with increasing urgency. You've got the regular boarders like me, and then you got the weekday warriors. They board here too, but they're all rich kids who live in Birmingham and go home to their parents' air-conditioned mansions every weekend. Those are the cool kids. I don't like them, and they don't like me. And so if you came here thinking that you were hot shit at public school, so you'll be hot shit here, you best not piss in with me. You did go to public school, didn't you? I said absent-mindedly. I began picking at the cracks in the couch's leather, digging my fingers into the foamy whiteness. Right, you did. Probably because if you had gone to private school, your frickin' shorts would fit, he laughed. I wore my shorts just below my hips, which I thought was cool. Finally I said, yeah, I went to public school, but I wasn't hot shit there, Chip. I was regular shit. Ha, that's good, and don't call me Chip. Call me the Colonel. I stifled a laugh. The Colonel? Yeah, the Colonel, and we'll call you... Pudge. Huh? Pudge, the Colonel said, because you're skinny. It's called irony, Pudge. Heard of it? Now let's get some cigarettes and start this year off right. He walked me out of the room again, just assuming I'd follow, and this time I did. Mercifully, the sun was descending towards the horizon. We walked 5 doors down to room 48. A dry erase board was taped to a door using duct tape, and blue market read, Alaska has a single. The Colonel explained to me that 1, this was Alaska's room, and 2, she had a single because the girl who was supposed to be her roommate got kicked out at the end of last year, and that 3, Alaska had cigarettes, although the Colonel neglected to ask whether 4, I smoked, which 5, I didn't. He knocked once loudly. Through the door, the voice screamed, Oh my God, come in here, you short little man, because I have the best story. We walked in. I turned to close the door behind me, and the Colonel shook his head and said, After 7, you have to leave the door open if you're in a girl's room. I barely heard him because the hottest girl in all of human history was standing before me in cut-off jeans and a peach tank top, and she was talking over the Colonel, talking loud and fast. So, first day of summer, I'm in Grand Old Vine Station when this boy named Justin, and we're at his house watching TV and on the couch, and mind you, I'm already dating Jake. Actually, I'm still dating him, miraculously enough, but Justin is a friend of mine from when I was a kid. And so we're watching TV and literally chatting about the SATs, and Justin puts his arm around me, and I think, oh, that's nice. We've been friends so long, and this is totally comfortable. And we're just chatting, and then I'm in the middle of a sentence about analogies or something, and like a hawk, he reaches down and he honks my boob. Honk, a much too firm 2 to 3 second honk. And the first thing I thought was, okay, how do I extract this claw from my boob before it leaves permanent marks? And the second thing I thought was, God, I can't wait to tell Takumi and the Colonel. The Colonel laughed. I stared, stunned partly by the force of the voice emancipating from the petite but God, curvy girl, and partly by the gigantic stacks of books that lined her walls. Her library filled her bookshelves, and they overflowed into waist-high stacks of books everywhere, piled haphazardly against the walls. It was one of them moved, I thought the domino effect would engulf the 3 of us in an asphyxiating mass of literature. Who's the guy that's not laughing at my very funny story? She asked. Oh, right, Alaska. This is Pudge. Pudge memorizes people's last words. Pudge, this is Alaska. She got her boob honked over the summer. She walked over to me and, with her hand extended, then made a quick move downwards at the last moment and pulled down my shorts. Those are the biggest shorts in the state of Alabama. I like them baggy, I said, embarrassed, and pulled them up. They've been cool back in Florida. So far in our relationship, Pudge, I have seen your chicken legs entirely too often, the Colonel deadpanned. So Alaska, sell us some cigarettes, and then somehow the Colonel talked me into paying $5 for a pack of Marlboro Lights. I had no intention of ever smoking. He asked Alaska to join us, but she said, I have to find Takumi and tell him about the honk. She turned to me and asked, Have you seen him? I had no idea whether I'd seen him, since I had no idea who he was. I just shook my head. All right, meet you at the lake in a few minutes then. The colonel nodded. At the edge of the lake, just before the Sandy and the colonel told me fake beach, we sat down in an Audrey-neck swing. I made the obligatory joke, "Don't grab my boob." The colonel gave an obligatory laugh and then asked, "Want to smoke?" I never smoked a cigarette, but when in Rome. "Is it safe here?" "Not really," he said, then lit the cigarette and handed it to me. I inhaled, coughed, wheezed, gasped for breath, coughed again, considered vomiting, grabbed the swinging bench and spinning and threw the cigarette to the ground and stomped on it, convinced my grape perhaps did not involve cigarette. "Smoke much?" he laughed, then pointed to a white speck across the lake. "See that?" "Yeah," I said. "What is that, a bird?" "It's the swan," he said. "Wow, a school with a swan. Wow." "The swan is the spawn of Satan. Never get closer to it than we are now." "Why?" "It has some issues with people. It was abused or something. It'll rip you to pieces. The eagle put it there to keep us from walking around the lake to smoke." "The eagle?" "Mr. Starnes, codenamed the Eagle, the dean of students. Most of the teachers live on campus, and they'll all bust you. But only the Eagle lives in the dorm circle, and he sees all. He could smell a cigarette from 5 miles. "Isn't his house back there?" I asked, pointing to it. I could see the house quite clearly, despite the darkness, so it followed. He could probably see us. "Yeah, but he doesn't really go into blitzkrieg mode until classes start," Chip said nonchalantly. "God, if I get in trouble, my parents will kill me," I said. "I suspect you're exaggerating, but look, you're going to get in trouble. 99% of the time, your parents will never have to know, though. The school doesn't want your parents to think you became a fuck-up here, and more than you want your parents to know that you're a fuck-up." He blew a thin stream of smoke forcefully around the lake. I had to admit, he looked cool doing it. Taller somehow. "Anyway, when you get in trouble, just don't tell anyone. I mean, I hate the rich snots here with a fervent passion. I usually reserve only for dental work and my father, but that doesn't mean I would rat them out. Pretty much, the only important thing is never, never, never rat." "Okay," I said, although I wondered, if someone punches me in the face, I'm supposed to insist I ran into a door? It seemed a little stupid. How do you deal with bullies and assholes if you can't get them into trouble? I didn't ask Chip, though. "Alright, Budge, we have reached the point in the evening where I am obligated to go and find my girlfriend. So give me a few of those cigarettes you'll never smoke anyway, and I'll see you later." I decided to hang out on the swing for a while, half because the heat had finally dissipated into a pleasant if muggy 80-something, and a half because I thought Alaska might show up. But almost as soon as the colonel left, the bugs and roached no-see-ums, which for the record you can see, and mosquitoes hovered around me in such numbers that the tiny noise of their rubbing wings sounded like cacophonous, and then I decided to smoke. Now, I did think the smoke would drive the bugs away, and to some degree it did. I'd be lying if I claimed I became a smoker to ward off insects. I became a smoker because 1. I was in an Andronek swing by myself, and 2. I had cigarettes, and 3. I figured that if everyone else could smoke a cigarette without coughing, I could damn well too. In short, I didn't have a very good reason, so yeah, let's just say that 4 was the bugs. I made it through 3 entire drags before I felt nauseous and dizzy and only semi-pleasantly buzzed. I got up to leave, and I stood up. A voice behind me said, "So, do you really memorize people's last words?" She ran up beside me and gave my shoulder and pushed me back onto the port swing. "Yeah," I said hesitantly. I added, "You want to quiz me?" "JFK," she said. "That's obvious," I answered. "Oh, is it now?" she asked. "No, those were his last words. Someone said, 'Mr. President, you can't say Dallas doesn't love you.' And then he said, 'That's obvious,' and then he got shot." She laughed. "God, that's awful. I shouldn't laugh, but I will." And then she laughed again. "Okay, Mr. Famous Last Words boy, I have one for you." She reached into her overstuffed backpack and pulled out a book. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, The General in His Labyrinth. Absolutely one of my favorites. It's about Simon Bolivar. I didn't know who Simone Bolivar was, but she didn't give me time to ask. It's a historical novel, so I don't know if this is true, but in the book, do you know what his last words are? No, you don't, but I'm going to tell you, Signor Parting Remarks. And then she lit a cigarette, sucked on it so hard for so long that I thought the entire thing might burn off in one drag. She exhaled and read to me. He, that is Simon Bolivar, was shaken by the overwhelming revelation that the headlong race between his misfortunes and his dreams was at the moment reaching the finish line. The rest was darkness. Damn it, he sighed. How will I ever get out of this labyrinth? I knew great last words when I heard them, and I made a mental note to get a hold of a biography of this Simone Bolivar fellow. Beautiful last words, but I didn't quite understand. So, what's the labyrinth? I asked her, and now is a good time as any to say she was beautiful. She smelled of sweat and sunshine and vanilla, and on that thin moon night I could see little more than her silhouette, except for when she smoked, when the burning cherry of the cigarette washed her face in pale red light. But even in the dark I could see her eyes, fierce emeralds. She had the kind of eyes that predisposed you to supporting her every endeavor, and not just beautiful but hot too, with her breasts straining against her tight tank top, her curved legs swinging back and forth beneath the swing, flip-flops dangling from her electric blue painted toes. It was right then, between when I asked her about the labyrinth and when she answered me, that I realized the importance of curves, of the thousand places where girls' bodies eased from one place to another, from arc to foot, ankle to calf, from calf to hip, to waist to breast, to neck to ski slope, to nose to forehead, to shoulder, to concave, the arc of the back, to the butt, to the etc. I'd noticed curves before, of course, but I had never quite apprehended their significance. Her mouth closed to me. I could feel her breath warmer than the air. She said, "That's the mystery, isn't it? Is the labyrinth living or dying? Which is he trying to escape, the world or the end of it?" I waited for her to keep talking, but after a while it became obvious she wanted an answer. I don't know," I said finally. "Have you really read all those books in your room?" She laughed. "Oh, God, no. I've read maybe a third of them, but I'm going to read them all. I call it my life's library. Every summer since I was little, I've gone to garage sales and bought all the books that looked interesting. So I always have something to read. But there is so much more to do. Cigarettes to smoke, sex to have, swings to swing on. I'll have more time for reading when I'm old and boring." She told me that, and I reminded her of the Colonel when he came to Culver Creek. They were freshmen together. She said both scholarship kids with, as she put it, a shared interest in booze and mischief. The phrase booze and mischief left me only worrying. I'd stumbled into what my mother referred as the wrong crowd, but for the wrong crowd they seemed awfully smart. As she lit a new cigarette off the butt of her previous one, she told me that the Colonel was smart, but hadn't done much living when he got into the creek. "I got rid of that problem quickly," she smiled. "By November, I'd gotten him his first girlfriend, a perfectly nice non-weekday warrior named Janice. He dumped her after a month because she was too rich for his poverty-soaked blood or whatever. We pulled our first prank that year. We filled classroom 4 with a thin layer of marbles. We've progressed some since then, of course." She laughed. So Chip became the Colonel, the military-style planner of their pranks, and Alaska was ever Alaska, the larger-than-life creative force behind them. "You're smart like him," she said. "Quieter, though, and cuter. But I didn't even just say that because I love my boyfriend." "Yeah, you're not that bad either," I said, overwhelmed by her compliment. "But I didn't just say that because I love my girlfriend. Oh, wait, right. I don't have one." She smiled. "Yeah, don't worry, Pudge. If there's one thing I can get you, it's a girlfriend. Let's make a deal. You figure out what the labyrinth is and how to get out of it, and I'll get you laid." "Deal." We shook on it. Later I walked toward the dorm circle beside Alaska. The cicadas hummed their one-note song, just as they had at home in Florida. She turned to me as we made our way through the darkness, and then said, "When you're walking at night, do you ever get creeped out, and even though it's silly and embarrassing, you just want to run home?" It seemed too secret and personal to admit to a virtual stranger, but I told her, yeah, totally. For a moment she was quiet. Then she grabbed my hand and whispered, "Run, run, run, run," and took off, pulling me behind her.